First I was like, no! And then I was like, yes! Hi, how you doing? Welcome. Sony have revealed the PS5 controller, the DualSense, and it has been a big surprise. I think everyone was expecting an incremental update to the DualShock 4, when in fact it has brand new form factor and a surprising colour scheme. So let's talk about it. And if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future content. Out of nowhere, on the PlayStation blog, Sony revealed the full details of the new DualSense controller. It was a post by Hideaki Nishino, the Senior Vice President for Platform Planning and Management. Now, when I first saw the images of it, I've got to admit I didn't like it. I just thought it was too weird, too different, change for change's sake. And what I'm astounded by is how my opinion has changed so much after a day, basically. I think it was just the shock of it being so very different. So what Sony said is that it has begun sending out versions of this controller to developers, and so this post was probably a way to make sure that they control the information to the public so that it doesn't leak as often it normally does. The biggest change is the shape. It's a radical shift from the DualShocks. Now, if you look at the DualShocks, they all have a common thread, a common ancestry. From the very first one that came with the PS1 all the way to the DualShock 4 on the PS4. They have this angular shape with these somewhat pointy grips for the handles. And so with this controller, the DualSense, what you can see immediately is that it is more curved. It has a more all-in-one design. And it's very similar in some ways to the Xbox and other controllers. And it's a dramatic departure to do something so different from what has come before. Of course, there are comments that it is emulating, or that Sony is emulating the design of the Xbox One controller, but what they are obviously going for is something that's going to have improved ergonomics, more comfortable to hold, and perhaps this less angular, this more curved way is naturally the right fit for the hand. So why such a dramatic change? Well, since early in the generation when the Xbox One wasn't doing so well, what Microsoft did do well was promote the controller, which was widely accepted to be very comfortable. And Microsoft they've controlled the narrative that they have the superior controller. And PlayStation, Sony, they've never argued this. There has been a general understanding that the DualShock is less comfortable. Certainly if you look at the DualShock 3, I remember that it was a very uncomfortable controller. It gave me pain, it gave me muscle pain. And so when the DualShock 4 came, it was so much more comfortable. It was redesigned in a more iterative way, a more subtle way. It still was not given the recognition that it is a much more comfortable controller. So here, now, maybe with the DualSense, with this more curved, natural shape, it will fit better in the hands, and then perhaps from going forward, Sony will be able to claim that their controller is the most comfortable in the world. And just as an addendum to that, just to add to that, the left and the right thumbstick, they're in exactly the same place, and there was a push by some people to have the offset stick design that the Microsoft has. Whilst the Xbox One controller is regarded as more comfortable, it is not necessarily the case that it's the thumbsticks that make it more comfortable. Maybe it's just that design. And Sony, certainly they said this at the launch of the PS4, that there is nothing more intrinsically more comfortable about having offset thumbsticks. And so that's why they've retained their original thumbstick positioning. What is the most immediately obvious difference is the colour. Now, unlike previous DualShock controllers, which have been black, all black, this sports a two-tone design. So if you have a look at it, the grips, the top half, it's all white, and the buttons and the thumbsticks, they're black. So immediately you see that striking difference there. On top of that, the buttons, whereas previously the shape buttons, they all had the colours of the shapes, the square, the triangle, the circle, the cross, they all normally have the PlayStation colours with them, and now here they are all clear and you have this translucent plastic, and it has been compared to the buttons on the PS Vita. And for this particular controller, you can understand why they've done it, because those colours, they would have stood out and it would not have been a good match. I know some people feel that perhaps with QTEs it might make it more difficult, but that shouldn't really be a problem once you become familiar with a game. So I think the change with the colour being the first standard controller to come in the box with a different color scheme. This is why there has been a bit of pushback from some of the fandom, and I can understand why. And what you have seen in reaction is a number of creative people making these designs of, they've taken that DualSense controller and they've customized it with their own color schemes, and they've created a whole series of variants. One particular one that's been created has adopted the PlayStation color scheme. It's a black controller and it has the colored face buttons, and it looks really good, but it doesn't look as good as I would have imagined it in my head. With the white colors, it emphasizes the differences in the shape a lot more. What's quite interesting about this different color, because it's so different, is that perhaps it matches with the PS5 base console, because of course we haven't seen what the console chassis looks like. And what might give us a couple of ideas of what it could look like is that previously Sony have released the PS4 Glacial White console, so it might have that sort of color scheme mixed with black. That might also be two-tone as well. Dutch technology gaming website Let's Go Digital, they've created a concept design and it actually looks quite beautiful. It looks like it could be a good match for the DualSense. So let me quickly run through some of the main differences. The L1 and R1 buttons are a bit taller, so there's more to touch. The L1 and L2 buttons and the R1 and R2 buttons, they don't have a plastic barrier between them. They run on straight to each other, and so that should make it easier to move your fingers when going from one to the other. Additionally, the thumbsticks, they have a textured grip. On the DualShock 4, it's smoother, and the touchpad is a different shape. On the DS4, it's more rectangular. With this, it has more of a curved shape on the sides. The share buttons and options buttons now have icons on them and not text, and there's a reason for that I'll come back to later. And additionally, the PlayStation button, or home button, however you want to call it, previously was a circular button with a PS logo printed on it, and now it is actually, the button is the PS logo. So just by pressing it, I guess it brings you closer to PlayStation. Now, a couple of the features under the hood which you can't see, but they have been mentioned previously in the Wired articles. The first one is the haptic feedback. Now what this is, it gives a profound sense of rumble. It's a really advanced type of rumble. So if you are driving in a car game, a racing game, you will be able to feel the difference from going from the track to the side of the track, and you'll actually be able to feel that coming through in the controllers. Additionally, there are the adaptive triggers in the L2 and R2 buttons. Now these are like what you have in the Xbox One controller, in that you can feel more resistance or tension in the buttons, and also, for example, if you are holding a bow and arrow and if you pull the bow, you can feel that sense of tension. Now, Peter Hines, who's the Vice President of Bethesda's marketing and public relations, he actually wrote a Twitter post about it. He must have been allowed by Sony, I imagine, unless he was breaking an NDA. But he was full of praise for it. This is what he said. He said, "I've gotten to try the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers on this thing and was very impressed. I think games are going to do really cool things with them." Now, there is a big change with the light bar. The light bar, when it was introduced with the DS4, was criticized because it was a draw on the battery power. It would make the controller run out of power more quickly than it would otherwise. So what you can see here with this one is there is a change in the light bar. So whereas previously the light bar was at the back of the DS4, it's now been moved to the side of the touchpad. And one complaint when using it was if you're playing in a dark room, you could see the light reflecting off the TV, and that could be distracting. Now it's been moved from the back and it is simply a line on either side of the touchpad. And in this way, the player can actually see the colors of the light bar. But it may have repercussions with PSVR. This is because the light bar, it was used with some PSVR games to track the position of the DualShock 4. And without it, it will not be able to do that. So Sony have gone on record to say that PSVR 1 is compatible with the PS5. So the removal of the light bar from the back signifies something that if and when PSVR 2 is released, then definitely Sony will be releasing its own custom VR controller for it. Quite simply, the DualShock 4 is not immersive enough, certainly when you see these more grip-like type of controllers that are now available for PC VR. Now, the other new feature that it will have is a built-in microphone array, a set of microphones that will be built in that will enable you to voice chat directly through the controller without needing a separate external headphone. And this can be really beneficial because I don't know if you've played multiplayer games online and you've been in a lobby and there hasn't really been anybody speaking, and that makes it feel a bit vacant, a bit empty. But with a microphone where everybody is guaranteed a microphone, it means that there will be more lively conversations, and that can all be done through the microphone. What Sony have gone on to say in the article is that the ideal way of voice chat is definitely with a separate bespoke microphone, and it will have voice cancelling technology. So if you are in a room and you have got a noisy background, somebody in the background, your mum or your wife shouting at you to come and have your dinner, then the voice cancelling in the controller should hopefully soften their volume so that anybody listening will not have to endure all that. And the other feature that it could be used with is, if you recall, there has previously been a patent for AI, some sort of AI interface with the PS5, some sort of artificial intelligence control. Maybe it is simply going to be something like the use of Alexa, who knows. But if there is that technology built into the PS5, then this microphone will give you that easy access straight through the controller. Additionally, there is a headphone jack built in. Now, the share button has morphed to become the create button, or perhaps it's called the share and create button. What Hishino said about the new share button is, you'll notice there is no longer a share button as we had with DualShock 4. Don't worry, it's not going away. In fact, we've built upon the success of our industry first share button to bring you a new create button feature. With Create, we're once again pioneering new ways for players to create epic gameplay content to share with the world or just to enjoy for themselves. We'll have more details on this feature as we get closer to launch. So what this extra feature is not clear. It may be related to the game slice patent that was revealed previously. And this depicted a way for people to make mini level segments from the games they're playing so that they could share it with their friends to play. Now, it sounds like a cool feature, but Sony went to all this trouble to innovate and create a brand new share button, which they launched with the DualShock 4, and it became so successful that even the competition understood the importance of it and imitated it. Both Nintendo and now Microsoft, who are now introducing the share button with the Series X. So it seems a bit silly to rebrand it completely. So hopefully they stick to the share button name and they just say that it allows you to create as well. The DualSense uses a rechargeable battery just like the DualShock 3 and 4. However, now it uses the more standard USB-C charge cable that you get with most Android phones. In his blog post, Hideaki Nishino then goes to talk a little bit about the planning process or the design process of the DualSense. And what's really interesting to learn is that Sony has been working on this controller for many years. I don't know what that means, 4 or 5 years, but basically they've been spending all this time on it and they've worked on several concepts and made hundreds of mock-ups, and then they settled on this final design. And they tested it with a wide range of gamers with different hand sizes just so that it could be comfortable and have the best ergonomics for as many people as possible. In that process, they had to take account of many different things, such as making sure that the new adaptive trigger components could fit in the controller without making it unnecessarily bulky. It's just really interesting to learn all this work that goes on behind the scenes to create a controller that is as comfortable as possible for the market. And at the end, there was actually some words from PlayStation boss Jim Ryan. And this is what he says. DualSense marks a radical departure from our previous controller offerings and captures just how strongly we feel about making a generational leap with PS5. The new controller, along with the many innovative features in PS5, will be transformative for games, continuing our mission at PlayStation to push the boundaries of play now and in the future. I'm actually really interested to hear this and find out what exactly it means. Microsoft, the way they have presented their Series X, games for the Series X will be compatible with the Xbox One. They are taking a more iterative approach, but Sony has repeatedly said that it is trying to make bigger leaps. They're trying to take a generational approach, and Mark Cerny also said this during that deep dive. So what does this mean? I mean, in practical terms, they introduced the share button, and this was definitely an innovative feature. It became a part of mainstream gaming, introducing streaming to everybody. but hopefully it is not just something gimmicky. So we will find out what that means exactly. So overall, I'd say the DualSense reveal has been a big win for Sony. Coming off the back of the deep dive, this has been a lot more well received. There's been a lot of coverage, and the fact that it is so different. If you look at the Series X controller, which is essentially the same as the Xbox One controller, this is a surprise, and it looks good. It looks different. It looks like it could actually be improving the whole gameplay experience and the comfort levels, and to have something new that makes this whole look forward to the next generation that much more exciting. And I'm definitely looking forward to what Sony is going to reveal next for the PlayStation 5. Now you've had a bit of time to digest it all, do you like the design of the DualSense? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, hit the like button and keep safe out there. Cheers!